So welcome everybody to the fourth and final session this afternoon at the Word on the Street teen event. We are sponsored this year by the Lethbridge Herald, our local newspaper, so that's kind of cool. We have had 3 authors talking with us already this afternoon, and like I said, this is our 4th author coming to talk to us. We are going to have a nice little conversation with Courtney Summers, who's going to tell us all about her books and her writing and anything else. We do have a question and answer portal at the bottom or side or somewhere on your Zoom screen. If you have questions you would like to ask, you can toss them in there and Courtney will do her best to answer. And at the very end of the session, if you stick around for the whole time, this is your incentive, I have a copy of Sadie, hardcover copy of Sadie to give away to our attendees. So stay tuned for more about that. We also have Shar joining us to do an ASL interpretation for the session. So thank you again for Shar and all your hard work this afternoon.
Thank you.
And there we go. All right, I've got things looking the way I need them to be looking now. Excellent. So welcome everybody again to our final session here at the Word on the Street teen area. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about where we are, which is, well, I am in Lethbridge, Alberta, and the Lethbridge Public Library is here on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains. So we would like to pay respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future. We also need to recognize and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land, as well as all of the stories that come along with all of that. The city of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. And again, stories, people, history, all wonderful things to learn more about. And you guys can pop to the library to find out some things about that and talk to people and read some things. Excellent. So welcome, Courtney, to sort of, to the Lethbridge Public Library. Thank you for joining us with the Word on the Street. For those of you who don't know who Courtney is I would say one of the very well-known Canadian authors, or at least I see your name on all my ordering lists. So that has to mean something. You are the best-selling and critically acclaimed author of several novels for young adults, including Cracked Up to Be All the Rage, Sadie, which we will talk about today. Your forthcoming novel is The Project.
Yes.
Okay. I don't have that on my sheet. I had to use my brain for that. So that's why I pause. Your work has been released to multiple starred reviews, you've received numerous awards and honors, including, here goes with the list, the Edgar Award, the John Spray Mystery Award, the Cybils Award, and the Odyssey Award. And you live and write in a scenic small town in Southern Ontario.
That's me.
That's you. Welcome.
I gotta, this is being recorded, right? I gotta carry that intro around with me everywhere. Just push play. Get it up on my phone. I'm Courtney Summers.
This is me. Excellent. So I guess first off, let's talk about Sadie, and then we'll talk about Project. Does that work? Can you tell us a bit more about Sadie, the book, as well as Sadie, the character?
Well, Sadie, who I have right here, it's a book about a girl who goes missing on the hunt for her little sister's killer, and about this popular radio personality who starts a podcast dedicated to finding out what happened to her. And it's told in an alternating perspective. So one chapter will be from Sadie's perspective as she's trying to hunt this guy down. And then the other chapters are podcast transcripts of this guy who wants to figure out what happened to her. She's a little bit in the past and he's a little bit in the present. And the whole book is trying to culminate in what happened to her and if she succeeded in her goal. And I like to think that it's pretty intense and pretty well written, an extraordinary book.
Yes, it's a very gripping story. It definitely sucked me in. And, and didn't let go either.
Oh, good. That's what I want. I don't want to hear you flung it across the room. I mean, I always tell people if they don't like my books, they can at least use them to level a table, Mm-hmm.
I have my laptop on a stack of cookbooks right now. Yeah. So books, useful for many things. So we have a couple questions already. Wow. One of the questions is about the podcast that accompanied Sadie. So there was an actual audio component that went with the book. What was it like, I guess, working that in and making that all work together?
It was a lot simpler for me than it was for my publisher, because they ended up producing the podcast, and they brought in like, I think a bunch of like a lot of Macmillan voices came in and did little roles. So like my one of my marketing team leaders does like a bit part, and some other people, the audiobook producer is like a 911 dispatcher. So they came in and they saw the transcripts, and they're like, we're going to turn this into a limited podcast series. And then it'll also be the audiobook. So the audiobook portion also has the podcast incorporated into it. Like, all I had to do was write the scripts. I feel like I got off pretty easy when it came to that. It's just you're just hearing voices in your head, like that's writing. So I enjoyed it. It actually took a lot of, because with normal perspectives, like first person perspectives, there's a ton of interiority there. So with the podcast, you like have to remove that and let people kind of guess what everyone's not saying, and what they might be giving away in their silences. There's just a lot to read between the lines. So that was like uniquely challenging, but it was very, very fun. It had a lot of, it was so different that I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah. Not that I don't enjoy normal writing, but I'm used to those twists and turns.
Excellent. Follow up with that from the same person. Would you consider doing an audio component or something similar like that again with one of your books?
I'd love to. I had so much fun with that. I just keep thinking, how can I make another gimmick for a book so it's like, how can I turn a book into a podcast? Like, that's a weird thing to sit down and say, but it was cool. Like, the more you can incorporate that's unique and interesting, it's fun to play with. I love a book that doesn't have a podcast element into it. There's none in the project. It depends on the story, but every time you get pushed outside of your comfort zone, it's exciting, because you learn from that and you're going to incorporate it into whatever you do next. Mm-hmm. But I'd love to do more audio stuff. It would be very cool.
Excellent. Comment on the audio and the podcast element. It was such a unique perspective and made the story much more rich and complex.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I love
go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I love the performances. They were very cool. The first time I got to hear the auditions and the recordings of the podcast, I lost it. It's the first time it felt like, because when you write a book, you never have the experience of, like, everything that you've done, and you don't get that one read that your readers do. But this was like the closest I've ever felt to being my own reader. That is such a weird thing to say. So when I got to the end, I was very upset with myself. I was like, I get it. I get what I'm doing to people now. It's not nice.
Comment and question from Maya again. You have really sharp and precise prose in all your books that paints a detailed picture in only a few words. How did you develop that skill?
It's really, really nice. That makes it sound like it was on purpose, and then I find out like it is kind of just where my voice arrived at. I think it also reflects the kind of books that I like to read, and I really I love simplicity of prose. I really enjoy something that, like a well-timed jab. I don't need a lot of words to get the point across. I don't want to read a lot of words to get the point. I just want to be like slapped in the face by the briefest, most concise sentences that I can find. So I think that's reflected in the way that I approach my work too. I just think there's something very, I don't know, the simpler that it's said, the more it gets to me.
Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah.
Yeah. So Sadie obviously is kind of the central character of the book, Sadie. Amy would like to know, what about Sadie the character do you love the most?
She is so singularly focused on this task to kill a man, which I've never had a character outright just like their quest is murder. Like, that was like a first for me, and that was so exciting. But she is so determined to see this through that there's nothing else she cares about. So when someone goes into a task and they literally have nothing to lose, like, it feels like anything can happen. And it was just, the recklessness of her was just, it was heartbreaking, but it was so exciting to write. I was like, anything, I can do anything. She's willing to do it all and lose it all. And I just went for it. It was so much fun.
Awesome. Just looking at my own questions. So I think in YA books, and then especially books with female characters, there's often a lot of talk about unlikable characters.
Yes.
And but I don't know. I don't think there's a need for all characters to be inherently likable. But why do you think there's that fixation, especially on that for female characters?
The patriarchy. Like, truly, I think we have a certain set of expectations and that are said and unsaid that young women and well, not even just young women, all women be sugar and spice and everything nice, and we don't want them to speak up and say what they're feeling or reveal any level of complexity. We often ask girls and women to be nice at the expense of themselves. And then when they do speak up, when they do push back against these expectations, they're punished for it. Like we see that over and over in the media and in real life. And it's so disheartening. It makes me mad enough to write about. That's basically why I'm doing it. Like if someone doesn't like a female character because they are unlikable, that's saying something more about them. I mean, you don't have to like every character you come across, but if you specifically dislike a female main character because she's female and unlikable, and you don't think these two things can ever go together, you've just told me I don't want to be your friend. Like I don't want to know you. No, thank you.
Fair enough. Yes. From Stephanie. Stephanie wants to know if we will see Sadie again. Her backstory was so gripping and authentic. Even though she might be considered unlikable, I missed her for weeks on end after finishing the book.
That is so nice. That's like that makes me feel like I succeeded at my job. Like if you want the story to continue, I know you weren't so sick of it, you wanted it over. That's always nice. Will we see Sadie again? You're an optimist, aren't you, Stephanie? I never say never, but it's unlikely I'll revisit that. But who knows?
It's hard to say much without endings, spoilers. And
now that I've said I won't do it, I'll my contrarian nature will be like, fine, I'll do it. But as soon as I agree to it, then I won't want to do it. So who knows? It's anyone's game.
Yeah. Catherine Wu comment, Sadie would be such an exciting TV series. Catherine would definitely watch it.
I would also watch that. There was actually a lot of, I've never said this before, so it's like an exclusive to the festival here. Sadie got a lot of initial interest in television and movies, and they all wanted it to become a show called West. So they really wanted to use a female story to drive like as a vessel for a male story. It was supposed to, they all wanted it to offshoot into something that featured a man.
Crimes.
And I couldn't agree to that. We got some people that really saw it for what it needed to be, but it's always encountered that hurdle, which is unfortunate and depressing, but what can you do? Hollywood.
Because he's still in there telling her story.
Right. And they're like, well, maybe
they wanted to turn it into his.
Yeah, a podcast show where after he's done with Sadie, it's like the book's not called West, it's called Sadie.
Very telling. Very telling.
Yes, it really is.
From Lena, how do you choose when to reveal secrets when trying to create a mystery or thriller plot?
Oh my gosh. That's what my editor's for. She's it's hard to know when to hold back and when to reveal. And I'm a chronic, I don't want to tell anyone anything. And then I eventually get to a point where it's like I haven't told them enough and I have to go back and revise. I think that's when outlining is helpful. I don't like to do it. I try not to do it, but it's my undoing every time. I think if you have a good idea of where you're starting and where you're ending up, these things can kind of organically fall in place. But the more complex your mystery is, the more you'll want to really think about that and plot it out. I just let books take me wherever they want to, and it like always ends in tears, but it always comes together. So it's fine. It's fine.
Excellent. So you sort of answered this one, but Fernando was wondering, do you plot your books with a specific ending in mind?
I do always think of the ending. It can change, but I have a general idea of where I want my characters to end up. It's not usually a happy place. I'm at least guaranteed a vibe when I start of where I want it to go. And it's always sadness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of heavy feels, as it were, in all of your books.
You're not here to smile, you're just here to cry.
Yeah. There are moments, there are definitely, the lighter moments, because otherwise it would just be a slog.
Yeah, I don't want to I want to put people through like the ringer, but I do want
Yeah,
them to thank me for it when they're done.
exactly. And you need that little bit of balance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'm trying to like pace the story or the questions so they flow. Uh, oh, this is a question, and I think I had one like this kind of in my list of things that I was going to ask. From Betty, it sounds as though this book took you and Sadie into some very dark places. Does any of that linger after the writing is finished?
It does. I think when you're writing about like the topics that I write about, they're brutal, and the research behind them is brutal, and you get a little bit of a gallows humor going on sometimes, just to like keep yourself above it and not so mired in it that you can't write about it. So Sadie was definitely, I would write it, and I would definitely, when I was finished, it's like, okay, I'm not gonna, I had to make the conscious decision not to think about it. And usually I'm constantly engaging in my work mentally and emotionally, and I'm always running dialogue through, but sometimes at certain points of Sadie, it was like, I just, no, no more for this moment. Just give me a minute, which it's so unfair because Sadie never got a break from her life. And I'm just like, I need a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me feel kind of weak, honestly. I'm like, I've put my characters through worse than writing about them. So what am I complaining about?
It was definitely one of those books where I had to like warn my husband what type of book I was reading. I'm like, if I'm like really cranky or like snappy at you in the next little while, this is why. It's Courtney's fault. But yeah, like I can't, and that was, over the course of, I think, like maybe 2 days that I read it. I can't imagine being surrounded by all of that for so long. But yeah, being able to step away was a thing.
Yeah, it's nice. You play a lot of video games. I think that's what saves me every time.
So many questions. A bunch of them about research. What type of research do you go into when you're writing, specifically for Sadie or the project?
With Sadie, and a lot of my books have sort of circled the same theme because I write a lot about violence against women and girls, and my work is a commentary against it. So I've researched over the years an incredible amount on trauma, on sexual abuse, on violence against women, on perpetrators, on victims and survivors of these kind of assaults. So that's been a long and storied research background that I have there. And then with the project, which I have right here, I'm gonna show everyone that cool cover.
Nice.
So much cult research. I mired myself in Jonestown, which was the cult that was loosely inspired the project. And for just a year or more than a year, I was just constantly cycling through information. I would not let myself really read anything that wasn't about Jonestown. I would read for pleasure and I would watch other things for pleasure, but I always had to have something about cults happening in my, it was just always at the forefront of my mind. So, and for Jonestown, that was really interesting. There was like a ton of survivor accounts. There's the alternative considerations of People's Temple, which is a big website. There were FBI documents, there were documentaries, there's tons of tape recordings of Jim Jones's sermons. It's just like whatever I'm writing about, I'm just gonna like throw myself into whatever I can learn about. And then when you do research, you also have to distill everything you learn and know what you need specifically to tell an individual story, because you can't factor everything into one book, but you should be informed enough that what you do choose to write feels very authentic and real. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like overloading yourself and then distilling it.
Yeah. Before researching and starting to write, someone would like to know, where did Sadie's story, and I guess for the project as well, for both of these books, where did those stories start for you? What was the flame?
With Sadie, it was the podcast. I just started writing the script. I was like, I didn't have I think a lot of things were still coming together, but it was just like, I want to see what this sounds like if I started a script with a podcast. And West was like an angry divorcee who was like in the basement doing an angry podcast. And I was like, this isn't good, but it could be. With the project, that had so many different starting points, because trying to get my foot into the kind of cult that I wanted to take center stage was very difficult, because in a lot of ways, that book is designed to challenge people's perceptions of cult victims and survivors. Like, we're not very empathetic to people who, seemingly walk into a cult because it's something they chose to do, when it's a lot more complex than that. And trying to create a dynamic that could hopefully bridge that empathy gap was very hard. So I feel like it had so many different starts and stops. It's hard to remember exactly what its opening was. It was just so much going on with that book.
Mm-hmm. From Tessa, you talked in your last newsletter about your own and the public's expectations for the project. How was it to get from Sadie's mental place to the project's mental place for writing? Because and they mentioned that they have similar elements, so I think there's very much an element of sisterhood in both,
Right.
The importance of that, but also very different themes and approaches.
It was kind of. And hello to her. I know who she is, and I appreciate the question and her support. She's been very kind to my work. With the project, it's hard because once I knew I was writing another sister story, I was like, that's what the first thing people are going to say is it's another sister story, which, oh well, like it's a story of women
have sisters, yeah.
Yeah, and women and girls have sisters, and there was also the fact that it was absent a thing like a podcast. So I'm like, well, it's very interesting. Sadie had such an amazing reception. It did so well. So there's always that intimidation factor. Every book you do, you want to be able to have stand alongside the book before it. And this time I was acutely aware that the book before it did some incredible things. So I was like, this is gonna be tough, but like all I can do is my best. That's like when you're sitting down to write, you can only tell the story that you're telling, and you can only do that to the best of your abilities. If I'm confident that I'm bringing everything I can to a book, then I should be satisfied with where it lands at the end of the day. So yeah, it's just navigating these two very different stories that have superficial similarities. It was a process, and it had a lot of untangling to it, but I'm really proud of both of these books. I don't think I answered that question very well, but
okay, it's all good conversation.
Newsletter did it better. Everyone subscribe to my newsletter. I'm much more articulate there.
There you go. There are the sisters in the book, and it's also a lot of your books all deal with women, girls, and often the bonds between women and girls, whether they're positive or negative. So what inspired you, this is from Mal, what inspired you to write the type of bond that the women in Sadie share? Because there's some complex relationships in that book.
There is. I just really, I was really, I have a sister myself, and I'm very close with her. And I actually really loved it. A lot of people know this about me. I love the show Supernatural. And I was like, that's such a great brother story. I want to write a sister story that is just that, like, intensely personal, profound, cutthroat, like just is 100% driven by a bond. I don't think up until Sadie I'd written a book that was about the intensity of a bond like that and what it can inspire in the people that it's between. And it was just so exciting because it's so narrow in its focus, and it was such a cool thing to do. So yeah, I think that's how that happened.
It's very much kind of the driving relationship in Sadie's life. Yeah,
it's really, there was nothing outside of it. It was so neat. It was cool. I'd love to do something like that again too. And in a way the project does that, but it's more of a strange sister story and how those bonds get bent and fractured and hurt over time.
Yeah. From Catherine, do you think all of the characters, Kendall's friends, Kat, Ruby, all of these kind of secondary people that meet Sadie through her journey, do you think they still remember her?
They will never forget her. Not. I refuse to entertain the possibility that they wouldn't, because it's that whatever happened to Sadie, like we all live on in other people, don't we? Like, so, they have.
She seems like she would have had an impact.
I think so. Yeah, I like to think so. Anyway.
Kind of more, I guess, back to the kind of your writing process and writing life. Before you were published, did you hire a freelance editor before you queried agents? And can you talk a little bit about how you started out Ashley says she's been a fan of yours from the start, and thank you very much for your books.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice. I really appreciate that. I did not hire a freelance editor before I started querying agents. I wrote a lot of bad books over and over and over. I think and started a lot that I never finished. I just think through the process of reading and writing and writing and reading, you're going to get better. If you're open to getting better and improving, you will. I think you have to sort of humble yourself before the process. I don't think there's anything wrong with hiring a freelance editor. You want to make sure that these editors are familiar with what you write and what you're trying to convey. You want to make sure like you're on the same page, so to speak, you know? So it's definitely an option. And I think if you can use that option to help you improve your craft, you absolutely should. It's a personal choice. Like how an author is going to develop and perfect and refine their process is going to be up to them. And some people opt to do, like I get edited all the time now. That's my life. So it didn't happen before, but that's all that happens now.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it definitely makes for a stronger final book.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. I need to be edited. I need it badly.
Just a comment here from one of the attendees. Thank you for making a story where the trauma victim gets justice.
Well, thank you for reading it. I'm glad that she did too. That I couldn't envision that going any other way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to. The world's hard enough.
Yeah. Back to writing. What does your personal revision process look like? How do you decide what needs to stay and what darlings you need to kill from Hannah?
It's a mess is what it looks like. When I write, I'll write a scene and then I'll go back and read it and poke at it, and then I get a feeling that if it's ready, I can write the next scene. And when I get stuck, I know it's because something behind me is not working. So it's just like a constant like stopping and starting. I'm just amazed laying it out like that I get any books done. But that's basically what it is. And there's also, after a certain number of books, you have a kind of gut feeling when something just isn't falling into place. There's some scenes that I've loved that had no purpose. And sometimes you just leave them there and you're like, I know this is making everything worse, but I love you so much. I want you to stay. And then eventually it's like you go through the 5 stages of grief. And then eventually you're like, okay, I'm putting you in a Word doc that I'll never open again, but I'll know you're alive somewhere, that kind of thing.
They still exist.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just like this sad, slow parting of genius that wasn't actually genius.
Little orphan sentences.
Yeah. Like there were flashes of my brilliance here. And then you look back later and you're like, actually, no. Yeah. It's very stop and start. I think I'm very critical. I like to read out loud a lot. That can really give you a sense of what's flowing on the page and what isn't. But
and pacing and everything.
Yeah. And then you get to the point where you hate hearing your voice and it's just terrible. It's like, no, that's failed me too.
Oh no. From Maya, if you were to have one of your books adapted to a show or movie, what directors would be your dream to helm those projects? Or what shows or movies have the same vibe that you would want to see for an adaptation?
Oh man. You know, I think like it would be really cool if I could attach any of my books to an up and coming director, you know, like a woman director would be like amazing. And then I have to admit that I've always like, I'm just about to say I'm a fan. And then I'm like, what's his name? Am I really a fan? David Fincher, right? David Fincher. It's David Fincher, isn't it?
I'm so not the right person to ask about movies or film.
I know. He did The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. He did Zodiac. Zodiac is one of my favorite films of all time. He's got such a vibe, but you know, I'm not convinced that couldn't be replicated by a new voice and a new perspective. So if no one else, you know, I'd let him, but I'm sure there's other people.
We have confirmation from the audience. Yes, it's David Fincher.
Thank you. I was just completely blanked on it. I was like, I love his movies, and I'm like, I must not love them enough.
Usually happens with me and author names. I'm like, yeah, that really great book by
that guy.
That one. Yeah.
Nobody tweet at David Fincher about this. He doesn't need to know.
Here's a good one. Is there something that you don't usually get the chance to talk about with your books, but is very significant to you? Special stories or characters or moments in your author career?
Oh my goodness.
This is from Tessa as well.
Is there something special? I don't know. I think people always come out with good questions. I don't really have any complaints or wishes in that department. I'm happy with the questions I get. I can't think of anything. I work on my book so much. It's like, what could there be? What could I possibly be asked about them? Like, that anyone has a question is amazing to me. You know, it's hard to conceptualize the reception enough to imagine the questions that might get thrown at you. Like, I'm just like, you have to know why you wrote what you wrote, and you have to be able to back that up with talking about it. But beyond that, I'm not lacking for questions.
Excellent. All right, we've made it through the audience questions for now, but if anybody has any other ones, throw them in the Q&A. We'll keep going.
Those were so good.
One of the ones I had jotted down is that many of your books are set in the US.
Right.
Yeah, you're a Canadian writer.
I am.
How do you choose your settings? Is it influenced at all through the editorial process?
You know what's interesting? When I started writing, all my books were set in Canada. I only queried Canadian agents and Canadian publishers as a Canadian author, and they were like, "We don't want you." It's like, well, so actually I had a thing where I didn't set my books anywhere definitive. Like, I'd invent small towns. So when my first book went out, I think it was my agent who was like, you could set it in a state, you know. So we did that, and she was American, and it was going to American markets, so we did that. Sometimes setting is going to be determined by the story itself. One of my favorite things about setting, which is not exactly an answer to the question, but I like it. This Is Not a Test is set in a fictional town called Cortege, and I don't think I've defined it in Canada or America. So all my American readers think it's set in America, and all my Canadian readers think it's set in Canada. And I'm kind of like, can I keep doing that? Because it's kind of cool.
Be sneakily neutral.
Yeah, and basically it's like, oh, that's nice. They brought the zombie apocalypse to their door, wherever their door was. I love that so much.
They can see themselves in it that way.
Yeah. It's nice.
From Annie, what is the biggest change in any of your books from the first draft to final?
I can't say. Okay, well, I might have entertained alternative endings for Sadie. I might have written one, and that's all I can say about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't say too much about endings, no.
Yeah. And I think I mentioned that Wes started out like an angry divorced guy in his basement, just making angry podcasts. Like, who doesn't? Who among us would?
You gave him a nicer life.
Yeah, I like him a lot better in these versions. Actually, the project used to be, it started out mixed media. It used to have like newspapers and stuff incorporated in it. It was adding absolutely nothing. It gave me an idea of the book I had to write, but it was just holding the whole thing up. So glad those are gone. So yeah.
A cool idea, but
it was
ultimately
cool.
Didn't work.
It failed. That was a nice way to put it. It failed badly.
How about, do you have any favorite podcasts? Since we talked podcasts with Tom Ryan, because his book coming out next month also involves a podcast.
What did he say?
He said my favorite murder and somebody, I can never remember if it's somebody knows something or someone knows something, but those two.
I've heard my favorite murder. That's a fun one. I like First Draft with Sarah Ennie, which is a writing podcast, and I like Nina LaCour's writing podcast. I like when I was writing, it was around the time of Sadie, I was listening to Criminal, which is like a true crime, and it's like bite-sized, like it's just long enough that I can sit and listen to it. And You Must Remember This is like an old Hollywood podcast, and just kind of explores the olden days of Hollywood, and they have this Betty Davis episode I love, so I love those. But the one that I really consistently listen to is Sarah's First Draft podcast. I love hearing the industry stuff, and she interviews a lot of my colleagues, and I love hearing what they're saying, what they're up to, so that's fun. Yeah.
Excellent. So do you like a shorter podcast then, or the ones that are long and rambling?
If I'm going to listen to a long podcast, I like have to clear my schedule and just like sit there and listen. Can you multitask when you do that?
No, I fall asleep unless I'm driving with a podcast. So like for long drives, I can listen to the long podcasts, though I tend to kind of come in and out of them. I'll notice, same with audiobooks too. Like I'll notice that I've been paying attention probably to the road as opposed to the podcast. Mostly I like shorter ones.
Yeah, I like things like that. I think the internet has ruined
concise. I like concise.
Yeah, it's nice.
And edited. I also enjoy an edited podcast.
Those are always good too.
Yeah, drunken conversations. Yes.
I feel like the internet has ruined my attention span just a little bit. Like now I have to watch Netflix. I have to do picture in picture. So it's like I've got to be working while Netflix is playing, or sometimes we'll be playing video games and I'll be like, I have to pause and look at this thing that I'm working on. That's bad. That's really bad. Don't be like that. The audience takes anything away. Don't be like Courtney Summers, please.
Worked out so far, I'd say.
That's true. I don't have complaints about it.
Awesome. All right. We've got about just under 10 minutes left. So again, if you have any questions, make sure you get them in that Q&A module there. And again, I've got a copy. If you are in Lethbridge or at least near enough to Lethbridge to be able to make it to one of the library branches, I have a copy of Sadie, hardcover copy to give away. So we'll be doing that in a few moments. But yes, if you have any questions, toss them in there. I've been asking a few people this afternoon, are there any other books by other writers that you're really excited about right now? Or already out, whatever.
Okay. I love Samaya Dowd's Mirage Duology, which is like a sci fantasy, and it's so good. The Court of Lions, the last one, it came out, and the whole thing is complete, so you can pick it up now. And it's about a girl who's a body double for a mean queen, or a mean princess, sorry, not queen. And it's so much more complex than that. I'm going to underserve the concept here, but it's like this incredibly built world in a different galaxy, in a different planet, and Amani and Marm, the characters, they're amazing. It's just like this complex sisterhood story, and the women in it are strong, and I love it. And I feel like I totally butchered my sell on that, but it's so good. And Tiffany Jackson has a book called Growing that just came out, and go get it. Just go get it. Do what I say and go get it. If you like creepy books that like totally blew my mind, Helen Phillips' The Need. Have you heard of that?
I haven't.
It's the scariest thing I've ever read. And it like plays in various genres kind of, but it starts out like the first 70 pages are like set up like a horror movie. It's about a woman who it just starts out, she knows someone's in her house and her kids are with her, and I don't want to ruin anything other than that, but I read that book and when I get scared, my eyes water. So I was reading the book and like tears were rolling down my eyes. Yeah, I was like, this is so good. It's like a masterclass in craft. It was so good. The Need.
Yeah. Follow-up question from the audience. Lena would like to know any new TV shows or movies that you're super into.
Well, Supernatural is going to end, and that's the only thing I care about. So I need new TV shows, and I'm so sad it's ending. Now we're gonna bring the whole chat down. I just watched The Devil All the Time, the Robert Pattinson.
Yeah.
It was a journey. I went on a journey with that. So it was not good in my opinion, but it was infinitely watchable. So I'm gonna watch it again tonight, even though I don't think it was that great. But the accents, have you seen the accent that he did?
No, but I might have to just.
You have to look it up. He's just like, they're all coming into this movie, and they're all like it's a star-studded cast. It's like Tom Holland. Holland. Tom Holland, Robert Pattinson, Sebastian Stan.
All the supers.
Yes, and they're just giving it. They're all, and I'm like, I don't know what this is. It's like 10 different stories in one, and I don't know. I'm still on that journey because I just watched it last night. I'm just trying to process my feelings. I don't know what I saw. I have to see it again. I don't know if I recommend it, but this might become my life. I don't know.
It was something.
It was something.
There we go. All right. Well, with 5 minutes to go, I'm going to do that. What would have been a draw in the actual tent. We're going to do a giveaway for the book. So if there are any Lethbridge and area teenagers, and I will let you define teen as you wish, but anybody younger than a grown-up who would like to win a copy of Sadie, you get first dibs. So put your name into the Q&A for me if you are a Lethbridge and environ sort of person under the age of 18 who would like to win this copy. And if there are no teenagers, because oftentimes it's all grown-ups coming to the teen sessions, which fair enough, these are great books. If there are no teenagers, I will throw it open to the grown-ups in the crowd. You do need to be able to come pick it up at one of the Lethbridge Public Library branches. All right. Oh, we've got one teenager. Yeah. I'm always like ridiculously excited when we actually have actual teenagers. So bravo, actual teenager. Bravo. Very happy. Any others? Anybody else?
You've won.
This person's got their fingers and toes all crossed that there are no other teenagers in the audience today. I can tell. I can sense that. All right. Okay, well, Mallory, it looks like the book is yours. So if you can also let me know if you'd like to pick it up at the main branch or the Crossings branch, I will get it off to the right library branch for you to pick it up. Thank you, everybody, for coming and asking some really fantastic questions.
That was
very fun for me.
You. And thank you for moderating, and thank you for the interpreter. This is amazing. It was such a great event. Lots of fun questions.
Excellent. Well, hopefully we'll be able to have you here in Lethbridge for real someday.
I hope so.
So in a real tent, being buffeted by the wind because it's Lethbridge. It's how we, really test the authors and see what they're made of.
Oh my God, I'm weak, but I'll come.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Courtney, for joining us. Thank you, Shar, for being our interpreter for the ASL stream all afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for this session, and everybody else who's joined us for other sessions. Thank you all very much. If you missed some, we will be having recordings of these up on our YouTube channel at some point. I cannot tell you when, but at some point.
Oh my gosh, I was going to see my Robert Pattinson thoughts. Didn't think that one out, did I? Anyway.
They're important. They're important thoughts. All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you for coming, and tune in to the grown-up stuff tomorrow.